Welcome into Jake and Joshua, where we sound off on some of the biggest topics in Big Ten football. And Jake, by the time this one is out, the college football playoff rankings will have been released. We know that we have two teams in this conference that can compete at the highest level nationally, but there are a lot of other teams that are going to be in that conversation too. And I just wanted to take inventory on, kind of what we think of these teams nationally. So, I don't know if we do a top six, because it'll already be out, but if you were the committee, rankings coming out, how would you rank them right now?
So I would probably have Tennessee 1, Ohio State 2,
Sure.
Georgia 3, Michigan 4.
Sure.
I'd put TCU in at 5,
Yep.
and I'd have Bama at 6.
Okay.
I think what's interesting, though, is it matters less where they're at right now and more where they're at down the stretch of the season. But what do we have this weekend? Tennessee plays Georgia.
Yep.
We obviously, if Ohio State and Michigan continue to handle business, they're on a crash course to an undefeated matchup. The key is that means one of those teams is going to lose,
Right.
whether it's Tennessee, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State. The context of how you play in that game and the context of how the others play outside of that game will decide whether or not the Big Ten can have 2 in the college football playoff or not. But that's the beauty of this game is now we're coming down the stretch of the season and things are going to start to reveal themselves.
Yeah, and if I was doing my top 6, I would have the same thing. Tennessee, Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan. Then I have TCU in there at 5. I'd have Bama in there at 6, but there'd be a conversation about whether Oregon actually deserves to be in that spot because their only loss this year is to Georgia. They beat a UCLA team that's ranked pretty high this year. They've got another top 15 victory as well. So some of their wins are better than Bama's. I think I trust Bama's quarterback play more than I would trust Oregon at the top level. That's where I make the decision. One team that both of us left off of there is Clemson, who is undefeated, and it feels like they're going to run the table because nobody in their conference is good. It is literally a terrible conference this year, probably the worst of the Power Five. How do you reconcile with having potentially an undefeated conference champion with maybe a one-loss Big Ten school or a one-loss SEC school that would be vying to make it into the college football playoff?
They'll get in if you run the table as Clemson.
But
and you
why should they get in if they don't have the strength of schedule?
I don't know. There's a lot of things I don't know and I don't understand.
Valuing strength of schedule?
Well, I mean, listen, the Big Ten, some of the wins that Ohio State has had this year, may be an illusion. Some of the wins Michigan has this year might be an illusion. If Clemson runs the table and they're loss free, if you go.
Who would Clemson have played? This is where I push back on that because I totally get that line of thinking. Who would Clemson have played that would be a playoff caliber team? The answer is nobody.
Yeah.
But Ohio State and Michigan have to play each other.
Yeah.
And that would be their only loss. And in this situation, it would be a close loss. I would say that I would take one of those teams over a Clemson who has not really looked dominant in many of their victories against, like, the Syracuse one. That was real phony. They should have lost that game. And then Syracuse turns around and loses to a Notre Dame team.
Wake Forest got smoked.
I mean, NC State's struggling right now. Like, every win that we thought was good for them has been an illusion too. The only thing they did was check boxes, but they didn't play anybody.
The question becomes, and I feel like this should be a public thing, is how do you frame the question? Is it who are the best 4 teams, who have the best 4 resumes, who would most likely beat the next 2 out? Those are all different questions and give you different answers at the end, because Georgia, when they're at their best, they're probably the number 1 team in the country. We've seen them at their best. We've seen them at their worst. Who shows up?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if we're just about checking boxes, then to me, I would go out and schedule 3 FCS opponents out of conference, and then see
That's
if
what
I
you have.
Could go to work and essentially just run through my conference. Like, that's, to me, Clemson winning all of their games proves not very much because they were supposed to do that and they weren't challenged. And so that's my only thing. Like, I think we're in a very unique spot right now where at the end of the year, we could have a legitimate conversation about Ohio State and Michigan both being deserving of being in the college football playoff, but you would have a situation like a Clemson. Then you would look at maybe some other potential one-loss teams. Like, do you take a conference champ one-loss Oregon over a non-conference champ one-loss Ohio State or Michigan? Like, do you value some of their wins more than the 44-point loss or whatever they took to Georgia in the very first game of the season with the brand new head coach? Like, those are the interesting discussions that I'd be very curious to be a part of.
The question again, it comes back to let's assume Michigan and Ohio State. We're both high on Illinois, so I don't want to cut them out. You know, Maryland has scary weapons. Let's assume that they're both undefeated. How does that game? What does the film say? What does the eye test say? Is it a close game? Are both teams slugging back and forth? You know, that carries some weight. It's the same as the Heisman.
Yeah.
What's a Heisman moment? I don't know, but we all know what a Heisman moment is when we see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that carries weight. Like, this discussion's over if one of the two teams gets run out of the stadium. Like, we're not talking about do they deserve, but if we feel like the winner of that game is a playoff caliber team and the loser of that game was really close to competing there, then I think we're in a situation where we can feel comfortable about, you know, campaigning to get both teams in. I want to leave on this one. One of the things that I don't think people do enough when it comes to these college football playoff rankings is they don't look at who's sitting there at 15 through 25. And the reason I bring that up, those are the resume boosters. Because one thing that Tennessee fans are doing right now is they're talking about their 4 top 25 wins. You have one right now.
Right.
Because all of the top 25 teams that you beat that you thought were good in the AP poll are not good anymore.
Yep.
But the 15 through 25 are the ones where people can start claiming how many top 25 victories they have, right? And that's what kind of bolsters the resumes and makes a separation for some of these teams. And these committee people think they're slick, but I'm watching them and how they fill out the back half of that.
By that measure, how many then Ohio State's resume becomes even better, right? Because Notre Dame was who we thought Notre Dame was to start the season is a lot different than who we think they are now.
Yeah, I mean, does a team like that sneak in? You know, what do you do with Penn State? Because Penn State could finish this season as a 2-loss team. Both of their losses were genuinely unimpressive. Certainly the one more so to Michigan. But like, how are they going to view Penn State? Do they still think that's a good team because they lost to 2 teams that could be in the college football playoff?
Yeah.
Like, those are the things that I really start to key in on, and that tells you a lot about where this committee's at.
The beautiful thing is at media days this year, we had a chance to hear Jerry Jones talk, and he was talking about when he had a chance to buy the Cowboys, and this was before the NFL was what it is today. And he was talking to some trusted people, and he's like, should I buy this team? Should I not buy this team? And he was talking about the on-field product. And trusted advisory board said, Jerry, you're looking at this wrong. Football is a year-round soap opera. And what we're doing right now is what makes football so beautiful. There's so much subjectivity, and there's an opportunity to debate, and that's really what's fun. I think as the season goes on, number 1 and 2 will be very, very, they'll reveal themselves. 3 through 6 and 7, there's going to be some serious debating on who should get in and why.
Dave Revson said this the best. I don't want to claim that these are my own words, but he said controversy is always on the fringes. We're not debating 1 and 2, and we're typically not debating that the best team will eventually be the national champ, right? But what we are debating is how did you decide between who 4 and 5 were? Or how did you decide the seeding, like between 3 and 4, and what the matchups are going to be? Because football is a very matchup-dependent sport. When we get to 12 teams, what we're going to talk about is not necessarily who's left out between 12 and 13, but, you know, how did you decide between 8 and 9 and who's going to get home field? Like, those are the conversations that we're going to have because the controversy lives on the fringes.
I can't wait for the expanded playoff because a little nugget you said earlier. Why not just schedule easy opponents, which is what we're seeing across the nation?
Why not?
Because you can only afford 1 loss and get in. An expanded playoff, hopefully you allow for more ranked in matchups with implications throughout the season.
And the issue that I have with the easy schedules right now is if the committee actually, if they were people of their word, and they did what they said they were going to do, they would value strength of schedule. So you having a loss would not hurt you as much as just checking the boxes against bad teams. But we're going to be past that because now people can go out there and play without fear because you can get 12 in there. And at the end of the year, all of your dreams and goals will still be alive. Jay Booty, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
And we'll be back with another one.